everybody, it's Christina from Adventures in Polished Land, and today I have my November reading wrap-up to share with you. My reading has slowed down a little bit as we near the end of the year, which is why I haven't done a wrap-up since my mid-month October wrap-up, and that means I'm actually starting off this wrap-up video with a book from October, and that is The Distant Marvels by Chantel Acevedo, published by Europa Editions. This book follows Maria Serena. When we meet her, it is 1963 and Hurricane Flora is about to hit Cuba, so she is taking refuge in the old governor's mansion with a lot of other women. And she decides that because she is now at the end of her life, she is going to take this opportunity to share her life story with the other women in the hopes that her story will not only be remembered, but potentially that it will be passed on as well. So we flash back in time and we follow Maria Serena from the time she was born. And we learn that her father in particular was a member of the Cuban Liberation Army and how they were fighting in the Third War for Independence from Spain. And in this book, I learned so much about Cuban history. I feel like we really did not learn much about Cuba when I was in school. We did learn about the Cuban Missile Crisis, and we learned about how Americans, at least at that time, could not travel to Cuba. But it was really fascinating to see the parallels of what the Cubans went through in Maria Serena's time to what had gone on in American history as well. So I learned so much in this book, but I also found Maria Serena to be such an amazing character. One theme that I am having in my own reading this year is reading about older women reflecting back on their lives, and this was certainly no exception. She went through so many hard times, but she really persevered, and her story, I think, is so important because there are so many people in this world today that go through similar things, and it just needs to be talked about. So I highly recommend this book. It was a little bit slower paced, but if you like something that feels like an oral history but is a historical fiction story, I definitely recommend this one, and I gave it 4 stars. So now we're moving into my November reads. I had started reading this book in October. It's The Door by Magda, and it was a very long reading process for me, so I actually picked up another book in the middle of that one to take a little bit of a break. That was Fun Home by Alison Bechdel. This is a graphic memoir. I read 3 memoirs this month for Nonfiction November, and this one is about Alison growing up in Pennsylvania to a really interesting family. Her father had purchased this giant old house and he was in the process of remodeling it, but he was also an English teacher and he was also a funeral home director. And Alison talks about growing up in this environment, and then as she gets a little bit older, how she has to come to terms with her sexuality as a lesbian woman. And in the book, she talks about how she had this epiphany about how she was a lesbian and how it separated her from her parents, but then she finds out that her father was actually a closeted gay man and had several affairs with men. Some of them were underage boys as well. So this book was very complicated. It's a quick read because it is a graphic memoir. I started it on one day and I finished it the next. And I had read this because I saw the musical version of this book at the Huntington Theater in Boston. If you're interested in my review of that show, I will leave a link in the description box. I have a post up on my blog about it. But I think seeing the musical really helped me understand the book more, because when I read the book, it was good, but I had that feeling of, what's the point of this story being told? Why is the story so famous? It just didn't click with me because I didn't really relate to it. But when I saw the show live and I could see the emotions of the actors right in front of me, it all kind of clicked for me. I could see the anguish of Alison's mother having a spouse who was living a lie and she was kind of just stuck there. And then you saw how Alison was so cute and endearing as she was dealing with coming to terms with who she is. And I found that the play, or musical rather, really helped to illustrate the book for me. So would I recommend the memoir? Yes, I think especially if you are somebody who has a complicated family history and you want to find somebody to relate to in that way, the memoir could be really helpful. but I would definitely recommend the musical. It might be really great to read the book and then listen to the musical, because I think the musical does add so much to the story, and for me helped me understand it quite a bit more. I gave the book, though, 3.5 stars. So then I went back to The Door by Magda Szabo. This is translated from the Hungarian by Len Rix, and this is a fascinating book. So our protagonist is telling us the story of her former maid, who was a woman named Emerence. And Emerence was this really unique and eccentric older woman. She wore a total veil. All you could see of her were her eyes, but it was not for religious purposes. She just dressed that way. And she lived in an apartment in the town, and everything was locked behind her apartment door. Nobody was ever allowed to enter her apartment. And we know right from the beginning of the story that our protagonist only saw Emerence without her veil when she was about to die, and she only got to go into the apartment at about the same time. And so this book is a very slow build where you learn about Emerence and you learn about her interactions with our protagonist. And it is so fascinating. For example, our protagonist rescues a dog that she finds as a stray, and the dog becomes sort of Emerence's pet. But Emerence abuses this dog. She literally hurts this dog to the point where the dog gets injured, but she loves the dog. So it's this weird back and forth of, here she is loving this dog, caring for this dog, but she is abusing it at the same time. It's very strange. And Emerence has a lot of these weird character traits, I guess you could say, where you think she's a great person, but you also think she's horrible, and she does all this weird and unique stuff. So it is so interesting to read about her in this book. That being said, the book is very, very slow paced. It took me quite a while to get through. Like I said, I literally took a break from this and read another book to give myself a little bit of a break from this story. But in the end, once we got to the end, I felt it was very fulfilling, and I felt like all the work that I put in to this reading experience was worth it for me. And I think I would return to this book, maybe not read the entire thing cover to cover, but definitely flip through it and just have those memories of who Emerence was, because she is a very interesting character. I can't say that enough. I think this is also a unique read because it takes place in the 80s in Hungary, so you learn about what it's like there after World War II and how World War II really has an effect on Emerence, for example. So I learned a lot in this book as well, and I traveled to another country through my reading. I've been doing that so much this year, and I've really been enjoying it. So if you are someone who likes reading translated fictions, who likes reading books that really are a character study on unique people, I highly recommend The Door. Just keep in mind it is a bit slower paced. And if I didn't say so already, I gave this book 4 stars. Next up, I read The Glass Castle by Jeannette Walls. I found this at a used book sale and decided to pick it up. This has kind of been on the back of my mind for several years now because I've always heard really great things about this book. This is a memoir, and Jeannette chronicles her life growing up with a nomadic family. This book was so fascinating because Jeannette's parents, they're difficult to describe because they definitely love their children, but they're really bad parents, and they probably should not have been parents. So for example, Jeannette's father can be abusive. He's also an alcoholic, and he and his wife, Jeannette's mother, are very, very neglectful. And I would say that Jeannette's mother in particular probably has depression or another sort of mental illness because she spends so much of her time laying in bed, unable to get out. So that was really tough to read, but the book is really unique in that you learn about how they traveled all over the country, specifically in the West, before they landed in West Virginia to live with her father's parents. And they just have so many outrageous things that they go through. And for example, at the beginning of the story, you find out that Jeannette had severe burns all over her body when she was 3 years old because she was cooking by herself on the stove and had a cooking incident. and then her father, instead of letting her finish her treatment in the hospital, checks her out and brings her home. This book really has a lot of interesting events in it. Jeannette's family lives in poverty, and you see how the kids have to get really scrappy and dig in the trash to eat and really take care of themselves because they're not being taken care of by their parents. If you like stories that chronicle different types of families, especially here in the US, where the kids are really resilient and they're going through so many battles in life without really the help of their parents, I highly recommend this book. It's pretty easy to read. It definitely keeps your attention, and I overall really enjoyed this. I found myself really drawn to Jeannette and really wanting her to succeed, and I think this is an excellently written memoir. I gave it 4.5 stars, and let me know if you've seen the movie, if I should watch it, because I think I've heard that the movie isn't a great adaptation of the book, and so I'm thinking I might want to keep the memory of the book for myself rather than watch the movie and then not enjoy it, but let me know what you think. Okay, moving on, we have The Color of Water. This is a Black man's tribute to his white mother by James McBride. This is also a memoir. I had received this for my birthday from my parents, and honestly, this is not a book that I would have picked out for myself. I am glad I read it. I did learn a lot, but I will not be rereading this one. So this is just what it sounds like. James McBride is telling his life story as a Black man growing up with a white mother, and his mother actually was raised as an Orthodox Jew. So that has an interesting tie-in with the story as well, because you get to see the parallels and the differences between what it's like to be a marginalized person in this country, whether it be religious reasons or racial reasons, and how other people treat them either based on how they look or what faith they practice. So that was very interesting. Unfortunately, I did not like the writing style. That's what didn't work for me. This book is told in alternating chapters. So in one chapter, we will get James's written memoir about his life. And then in the next chapter, you will get his mother's oral history. And so both of these chapters are written in the first person perspective, and that can be a little bit confusing, especially at the beginning of the book. But then also, because you're getting his mother's oral history, it's not edited. It sounds like she's talking to you. Sometimes she'll repeat things. Sometimes it's not put very eloquently. I think this would be a much stronger book if he had written out his mother's life story in the third person. I definitely understand that he wanted it to be in her own words, but for me that detracted a little bit from my enjoyment of the book because I was just focused on how the writing was so plain and basic and how I was getting that bit of repetition. This book was also a bit too religious for me. So James's mother converts from Judaism to Christianity, and they become very devout Christians, and that is prevalent throughout the entirety of the book, with James still being very religious to this day. So for me, I didn't enjoy that, and I didn't connect with that at all. So that took away a bit of my enjoyment of the story as well. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars because, like I said, I think he makes some very excellent points. I think it's an important story to be told, but it just didn't click with me, and I'm not sure I would recommend it. I think if you are interested in his story, definitely pick it up because it is easy to read. It's very basically written, but it's not a memoir that I would personally go out and recommend to everyone, if that makes sense. And it was at that point in the month I decided I was ready to go back to fiction, and I'm so glad I did. I picked up Home Fire by Kamila, Shamsie. This is a really interesting novel, and it's going to be a little difficult for me to describe the plot summary. Home Fire is the story of a family. We have Isma, she's an older sister. She has taken care of her younger siblings, Parvez and Anika, for many years because their parents passed away, as well as their grandmother. But now that her siblings are 19 years old, Yzma decides it's time for her to go back to school and get her PhD. And while she is in college, she meets this young man named Eamon, who happens to be the son of the defense secretary over in the UK. And soon you find out that Yzma's younger brother has left the country to join up with an extremist group in the Middle East. And the story really goes from there. This is one of those books that when it first begins, there are a lot of holes in the storyline, but they slowly get filled in over time. So I don't really want to tell you too much about the plot. But for me, this book was so incredible because I think it tells a very important story. And that is how anyone can easily be brainwashed by a cult or an extremist group, and they can join that group, and how simple that is. And I think it's happening every day to so many people. So whether or not it's an Islamist group like in this book, or if it's a political party here in the United States, I think it's really easy for not only young people, but anyone really to become so invested with the lies that they are told that they will leave the country and affect the lives of not only themselves, but their entire family and community as well. This book is written in different point of views as the story goes on. In the first chunk, you hear from Yzma, then you hear from Eamon, and so on and so forth. And I think that was a really great way to tell this story because you get to spend a little bit of time in each character's head and see their point of view and what their thoughts are on the entire situation at hand. And I think in this book, I had so much hope for what was going to happen in the end. I will let you read the book and find out if it was a happy ending or not. But for me, this was such a powerful read, very impactful. I gave it 4.5 stars, and I'm so glad I read it. I will say I picked this up at the used bookstore because it won the 2018 Women's Prize for Fiction. And I was a little bit nervous when I saw on Goodreads that somebody whose reviews I really enjoy gave this 1 star. But thankfully for me, it really resonated and I would definitely recommend it. And now I am currently reading Shooting Down Heaven by Jorge Franco. I am just over halfway through. I was really hoping to finish this in November, but I did not. I will definitely finish it now that we are in December. And this month I did color off one state on my USA map, which was West Virginia. I decided to use West Virginia for the Glass Castle because even though the characters in that book are nomadic for much of it, they do end up settling in West Virginia for quite a while, so I figured it was safe to mark that off on my map. That's everything that I read to wrap up October and November. I hope you are having a great reading month, and I hope that we can read a few more books before the year comes to a close. Let me know what you're currently reading, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.